Well, will we ever get a COVID-19 vaccine? It seems that COVID-19 is irrepressible in most societies. We can't defeat it. And we're faced with this dreadful dilemma. Do we go for herd immunity? Do we go for elimination? Or do we seek to suppress it? Do we know how to live with COVID? That's the question. Or will a vaccine come along that will save us?
Yeah, and I think particularly for those of us in Australia just now, we're thinking about the folks in Melbourne. I mean, we've joked about Melbourne, and we can't joke just now because it's a pretty serious situation. I want to take a slightly different route on this. Whilst a vaccine for COVID may or may not come, and the WHO yesterday were suggesting it does come, it may not be the all-encompassing solution that we think. But we need to realize, I think, that we live in a broken world and we need to look for a better one. And a vaccine is part of that. But could there also be a spiritual lesson in this for us? Okay, speaking of vaccines, I've been trying to understand something, and I thought this clip was really quite helpful. So, Steve, have a look at this.
When people say to me, oh, a lot of things are broken in the response to COVID in the US, the response has not been good. The one thing that hasn't been broken is the research infrastructure. Phase one is the one where it's about safety and immunogenicity. So you take a very small group of people, healthy individuals, that you give the vaccine to A, determine if it's safe, and B, determine in that case of vaccine if it produces antibodies. You try to define the maximum possible dose that is safe to produce a maximum antibody response. And for that, you go into different populations. You may take younger, older, especially older individuals because they don't respond as well. This is sort of where the rubber meets the road. This is where you take people, you give the vaccine, you compare it to placebo, large populations, to see if it actually protects. They're not skipping any stages. It's just being done at a very quick phase. It's just being done faster than it would normally be. The time from virus identification to the first injection in humans was 65 days. I mean, that is the speed of light. That is so fast. That is just unbelievable.
So, Dave, do you think that a vaccine will come?
I don't know. Everyone just seems to be assuming that it's going to happen. But here's the negative side. Here's the reason why not. COVID-19 is a coronavirus, and we've had coronaviruses for about 20 plus years, and we've not found a vaccine. It's like the cold. We haven't got a vaccine for the common cold. So it's not quite as straightforward. On the other hand, there's a lot of money to be made from getting this vaccine. Governments are spending billions, and the top scientists all over the world are all looking at it. And there have been 3 or 4 tests. As we saw in the video, it goes through various stages, and there's a couple now who are on to stage 3 tests. So there's a sign of optimism, but let's put it this way: at a personal level, I am not holding out for, oh, I'm just going to keep my life, hide away until a vaccine comes. Otherwise, I'll be hiding away a long time. So I know you might want that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you hid away for a very long time, Dave. But what if we don't get a vaccine? What is it now? Panic stations, and that's all we've got?
Well, I think for some people, there's a degree of depression. I mean, for you, it means you're stuck, not just in Australia, you're stuck in Perth forever.
It's pretty sunny out there. It's pretty sunny out there. It's not exactly Hobart weather of 2 degrees or Melbourne rain.
You need variety and you need other people. I mean, I think there will be a kind of panic thing because I think in order to help control the population, what governments have done is just stress this fear and fear and fear and fear of COVID. And I think when people begin to think, wait a minute, we're not going to get a vaccine, I think there will either be a tremendous pushback against all the precautions, and I think we're seeing that to some degree, but I also think that you'll get an awful lot of people who just think, I'm not coming out from under the duvet ever. You know, I'm just going to stay. I worry about the fear and the panic. Yeah. Plagues have always been around on Earth, and I think we're going to have to live with this one.
Yeah, or die with it in one sense. But Dave, you're raising the issue of mental health there, the stress, the depression, the anxiety. What about that bigger problem you alluded to, that this is pointing to a desire for something more, perhaps? Okay,
now, I'm not sure if you'll go with this. I hope you will. Otherwise, we're going to have a very interesting discussion. Here, I think, is why there's a little bit of I wouldn't say overreaction in the sense of, this is a very, very serious thing. I don't want to make light of that. But I think, in centuries gone by, people lived with disease and illness. You lived with high rates of mortality. And in the 20th century, in the 21st century, I think we live in a better world where things can only get better. And apart from a panic about climate change, I think we live almost as if we're immortal. And I think there's an unwillingness to face up to the fact that we live in a broken world which has diseases. If this one gets a vaccine for it, there'll be other ones. Tuberculosis is still around. There's still natural disasters. And without wishing to depress everyone, the 100% guaranteed statistic about death is all of us will die. 100% of us will die.
Yeah, that's interesting, Dave, because a couple of people at church had several family members and a couple of friends die during COVID lockdown. And I'm actually speaking at our church this weekend about not grieving like those who have no hope. The Christian's hope is different in the midst of death, isn't it? So is there a vaccine for this grief that people have about death?
If the immediate problem is, I don't know, there's a hole in your running shoe, then you fix it somehow. You buy a new pair of shoes, you do something, put some chewing gum in or whatever it is. The immediate problem for our culture at the moment appears to be, let's get a cure for this vaccine. But then there are a whole range of other problems that will come up. And so is this world always going to be broken? And I think what the Bible says is that the whole creation groans, and yet there will be a healing, and there is the possibility of a new heavens and a new earth, and a world in which there's no sin and there's no pain and there's no suffering. And the more I contemplate that, the more I'm kind of going, yeah, bring it on, And I think that comes about, to use the jargon, through the work of Jesus Christ, what he did, who he is, what he's going to do. And I think the question then becomes who you place your trust in. I do see, if you like, the vaccine, and I would call it the good news vaccine, the gospel vaccine. And if you're a Christian, you've got it. And if you're not a Christian, you can get it.
Yeah, so that's interesting, Dave, that not everyone's got the vaccine. It's available to people upon faith, trusting in Jesus, that he is the giver of life.
Well, it's who gets the vaccine. So it's going to be very interesting with COVID-19. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any anti-vaxxers in Perth?
A few that I've blocked on Facebook. There's a few of them, and they come with a certain package.
I'm amazed. There are apparently around 10% of Australians who would absolutely refuse whatever, no matter what was said, maybe 25%. So I read a really, really interesting article saying you cannot impose this on people. You cannot force it on people. You can't have compulsory vaccination because you get such a pushback. You've really got to persuade people it's worth having. I think that's exactly the same for the gospel. I think there is a vaccine and God says you can take it, but we can refuse to take it. Whoever, here's the free gift of the water of life. Whoever wants, come and take it.
Yeah. So get the gospel vaccine, or you can reject it, but you can get it.
But maybe I'll go out with this one. Revelation 22, right at the end of the Bible, there's this wonderful image of heaven as having this tree of life and the river of life, and the tree has leaves that are for the healing of the nations. And that phrase, the healing of the nations, when I look at the COVID-19 score charts, you know, who's got the most deaths, who's got the most illnesses, it's also depressing. And I think we need healing. And I think I'm certain that's what the Bible promises. And I think as well, to answer your previous question, right at the end of that, in verse 17, it says, the Spirit and the Spirit and the bride say, come. And I think that is possibly, not possibly, I think is definitely the most wonderful invitation of all. So yeah, we pray for a COVID-19 vaccine, but there is a vaccine for our deeper problems that's already here. And I would say to anyone who's watching this, it's about time you got gospel vaccinated.
So Dave, that's all to do with sickness and in health. What are we doing next week? What are we looking at that could maybe not be about COVID or COVID-related issues?
It's work. We're going to look at work, and particularly we're going to look at what difference faith makes in work. So since you and I don't work, we're not experts on it, but we're going to have a go anyway.
Thanks for that.
I'm going to say goodbye to you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks.
See you
next week.